Hey everyone, welcome to episode 18. Today's guest is Quincy Howard. After a brief break, I'm excited to continue the podcast with more amazing guests. In this episode, Quincy talks about growing up in the Deep South, the influence of family and elders in his life, being the story keeper in his family and the communities he's connected to, ley lines and portals in the South, living in Oaxaca, Mexico, and more. Even if you don't identify as a Black person or with the deep South of what is called the United States, I still recommend you listen to this episode to hear Quincy's stories and perspective, and perhaps be inspired to reflect on the soils, lands, and places where you grew up and live, your identity, your blood and chosen family, and the stories in your family, reef work and your bloodlines, what you learned was taboo to talk about, and more. Now, before I continue, I just want to say that at some point in the interview, I asked Quincy something and then I start laughing and saying, "Oh, I hope that wasn't too deep." I said something like that. And thinking back to that, I'm realizing that I felt sort of self conscious for asking him deep questions and for us to be having this deep exchange. And I feel like for a long time I have been self-conscious about being like too deep and being a deep person, and I don't know why that is. Scorpios tend to be deep people whether they're sharing that part of themselves or not. At least most of the Scorpios I've come across are deep people. And oh, there's this clock in the background that's so loud. I don't know if you can hear it. And so, yeah, I was thinking about how to share this because, in some interesting way, I still think I'm working through my self consciousness around being a deep person. I think it's just because I feel like this could be a projection and a fear, but I feel like people will perceive me a certain way because I'm like a deep thinker and deep feeler, and that perception will shape our relationships. It will shape how people will view me and shape their ideas of like, oh, is this someone I could hang out with, or is it always going to be deep? And that's just stuff in my own head, but I'm sure there are people out there who are having a similar experience. But being this deep person, it's more than that. It goes into me still working through like a person that shares a podcast like this, where it has sort of a spiritual twist or dimension about it. I've always felt like I'm a person that does have wisdom to share. I do have things I want to share, but I've always felt I I've I guess been afraid of how I would be able to, like, can't really find my words right now. I just well, I think really it's just me being afraid of how sharing things that are quote woo woo, how that would impact my relationships. Because it's a very real thing. It's a very real thing. In my experience, you might be thinking you're sharing something that could be helpful or that people might find interesting or could support them in their life in some way, and it could actually scare people or make them think XYZ. So I feel like I have been a person that's been afraid to share like this, and so starting this podcast is a way for me, one, to do something I've wanted to do, and two, to encourage myself to share like how all these other people out here are sharing, you know? And just to wrap this part up, because this isn't scripted, I think it's so funny that I do these interviews on Zoom, right? And several times after I've gotten out of these interviews, I go on Instagram or threads and I see suggested posts that relate to the conversation I just had with a guest. And it's pretty eerie. For example, I laugh self-consciously with Quincy, like, "Oh my gosh, I hope that wasn't too deep." Then I come across a suggested post on Instagram from someone called at Mr. Tomonoshi. It's at Mr.Tomonoshi. I'll put it in the show notes. And he shared this post about 2 weeks ago where it's titled, "It Ain't That Deep," in quotes. And I just would like to read a little bit of it because it made me feel better, but it was also eerie to like, it's also eerie for the algorithm to suggest this because it makes me feel like, is there someone on the other side of the screen that's orchestrating and pulling strings of what I'm saying? I don't know, but I guess that's the power of the algorithm that it's designed in such a way that it can suggest things to you to a T to what you're thinking about, talking about in public, because that's how it's getting its data. So I just want to read a little bit of this post and then we'll keep going with the intro. It's titled, "It Ain't That Deep," in quotes, "How We Traded Critical Thinking for Convenience and Called It Truth." It's disturbingly common. You offer a well researched, thoughtful response, and someone shrugs. It ain't that deep. But that statement is deep. It's a reflection of how far we've drifted from valuing thought itself. We don't just resist new ideas anymore, we resist the act of thinking. It ain't that deep. We are witnessing the cultural erosion of thought, the glorification of ignorance, and the fear of depth in a world addicted to speed and surface. It ain't that deep. That dismissal is how we've ended up wading in the shallow tides of ego, where waves of impulse knock ideas off their feet before they ever reach the ocean's edge. Thoughts dissolve before they can dive. Depth is denied at the shoreline. The rejection of depth is how we end up in critical situations without the tools to understand them. It ain't that deep. We are an impulsive society. Everything moves fast, but to truly think, is to slow down. And instead of slowing down, we crowdsource our thoughts from the loudest mouths, not the wisest ones. Tyrants speak for attention, not with intention. Everything is opinion. Nothing is rooted in research and investigation in depth. It ain't that deep. Most opinions today stand on foundations no taller than the sole of a running shoe. It ain't that deep. Opinion is easy. It's reactive. It doesn't require effort. And in echo chambers, idiocy reverberates. Individuals who don't even read have been chosen to lead. It ain't that deep. We must reclaim thinking. We must remember its value, to think for ourselves, to challenge what we're told. It ain't that deep. To gather before we respond. Because maybe, just maybe, it is that deep. And then he signs off, or this person signs off. And I thought that was so interesting to come across after I did this interview with Quincy. And I'm sharing that because, here I was sort of grappling with myself and this whole being deep thing. And there's someone out in the world who shared this reassuring message that didn't have anything to do with me, that wasn't even on my radar. I don't know this person. He doesn't know me. This person doesn't know me. So, and I wanted to share that because maybe some of you, dear listeners, maybe this, what this person has shared is resonating with you, and I'll just link this post in the show notes. All right, let's keep going. I learned about Quincy's work a few years ago and was initially drawn to it because I'm a visual person and love how he captures his life and travels through photography. I'm also curious about his life because he talks a lot about the South and the Deep South, places that I grew up learning from my grandparents as the last place they ever wanted to be or go back to. Now, my maternal lines come out of Georgia and the Carolinas by way of West Africa, and I'm sure some other places. You know, I'm sure my distant ancestors and my ancient ancestors came from other places. I've been to the South when I was a kid, as there's extended family members there. As an adult, I've been to North Carolina, New Orleans in Louisiana, and Virginia, and have a strong pull to Florida and Alabama, even though I haven't been to those places yet. I've wondered many times throughout life what my life and what my entire family would be like if my great grandmother and her family never migrated to Brooklyn, New York, and instead stayed in the South. I wonder what my life and immediate family's life would be like if my maternal grandparents never migrated to the Southwest in their 30s. I come from a childhood and family that's moved around a lot, and that's probably one reason why I've been so nomadic in my adult life. And I guess, yeah, another pull toward Quincy's work is because he's a traveler, but he is also deeply rooted in places he calls home. For the longest time in my own life, I've been trying to reconcile being rooted somewhere with a strong, flexible sense of identity around place, home, and community, while also being nomadic. Because, like many other people, I feel free when I can visit other places. At the end of the episode, Quincy talks about finding home in Columbus, Georgia, the Deep South, and in Oaxaca, Mexico. Here is his bio. Quincy Howard is a visual documentarian and ethnographer from Columbus, Georgia, dedicated to the preservation of culture, tradition, and storykeeping within the Black South. Quincy strongly believes that we deepen our relationships with ourselves by deepening our understanding of who and where we come from. A descendant of agricultural alchemists from Southwest Georgia and the Sea Islands of South Carolina, Quincy pays homage to his roots through ritual, culture/land veneration, and the utilization of ancestral and spiritual technologies. Quincy engages the use of sound, moving and still images, and his own lived experiences to conjure up memory that recalls both the past and future. His body exists as a vessel and his camera as a portal for stories to travel through. Quincy's work aims to recall, protect, and ultimately advance the tradition of story keeping within the collective Black South. Reflections from this episode. One reason Quincy is a story keeper is because his story keeping stewards and protects the identities of himself, his family, his people. As I prepared this episode, I thought about my own identity and what new identity I want to incorporate because I've just been thinking about my identity lately. And, this new identity I want to incorporate that will not only shape how I understand myself, but also contribute to my health and well being and how I experience life. Incorporating this new identity, which I'm keeping private, means how can I embody it? And sure enough, when I started embodying the new identity, I saw immediate shifts in my living space, my energy, my thoughts. If you haven't heard already, identity is a powerful vehicle for existence and expression, which can determine how we feel, perceive, relate, create, and more. the world is a tapestry of identities, not yet formed, fully formed, ever changing identities. And because I know how it is out here on these social media online streets, I'm not going to touch on every angle about identity and all the ways to understand identity. All I'm saying is what's already known. That is the power of identity, which can be passed down, remixed, created, destroyed, shape shifted. My own self understanding and literal life emanate from who and what I identify with and how and why. For Quincy, his own personal interests, his family, and the land and waters where he grew up and his culture has shaped his identity and continues to shape his identity. Quincy's connection with his family really touches me. Family can be tender to think about, talk about, especially publicly. I'm so grateful for what he shared because I know personally it wouldn't be, I think I don't know. I, I think it might be a bit hard for me to talk about my family on a podcast, but I'd have lots to say. Oh no, I don't think it would. I don't think it would be hard because I've talked about you know my I've talked about my childhood and family in other episodes. I'm just saying that yeah, family can be tender, and I'm grateful that Quincy was open to sharing. I don't think that's a small thing to do, you know? Yeah, so I'll be real and say I've never heard of a family having certain roles, and that's probably because of my own upbringing and family dynamic. It's pretty cool that Quincy is the keeper of the flame in his family. If I think of some of the family members, if I think of some of my family members, I can see them in different roles and how being in these named roles would help the family. Definitely my mom. My mom would be like the person holding deep ancestral memory, just eons and eons. Yeah, I could, there are some roles. Yeah, but no one would maybe my mom, but no one would identify maybe with some of the roles. And that's probably because no one ever sat anyone down and said, I noticed this about you. I think this is your role in the family. No one was ever sat down to hear, this is how you could help tend the family. There there hasn't been any. Maybe once, one time, one glorious time where several women in my family were in one room and we started making connections about different things in our immediate family. But yeah, there's never been like a gathering where we're all together to talk about who has what role and how to how to tend to the flame. So yeah, it was a gift hearing Quincy's story about being the keeper of the flame in his family because it really opens up my imagination of what could have been possible in my family, what still is possible. Maybe it moves you in some way. But getting back to what I was saying, unrelated to family, but maybe friendship wise, I also love how Quincy is relating with the women of the red clay in Oaxaca, Mexico. And we talk about that closer to the end of the episode. And yeah, this just goes to show you how there are ways to genuinely connect with people and are other than human kin across similarities and differences. And I feel like that's such a great reminder. People have been doing that for a long time, that cross cultural exchange, cross pollination, just getting together, sitting near a fire, eating, singing together, and, being, across similarity and difference, like I said, tripping over my words. And I think being able to do that is the stuff of life. Being able to do that with people who look like you and have the same interests and who you vibe with, and being able to do that with people that you don't look like and you have different interests, and maybe your personalities don't always mesh well, but there is something you can, there's some common ground, there's something you can connect on. Finally, with every interview, I craft my questions, but ultimately, I never know what a guest will share and what directions we end up going in. Closer to the beginning of the episode, Quincy talks about protecting the memories, stories, and magic of the Black South, particularly through story keeping. I told him what he shares reminds me of my beautiful friend Saskia, who, among many things, is an oracle from Oceania. And she talks often about gatekeeping or protecting the wisdom and spiritual practices from this part of the world, Oceania, the Pacific. I think about protection a lot. In my personal life, I've practiced protection in spaces I've lived in and while I've been on the road traveling. And many of the things I did to protect myself came to me intuitively. Other times, I found myself intentionally protecting myself, like putting more thought into it. Like when I've spent a large amount of time on public transportation, I've worked with herbal plants like oregano, elderberry, and garlic to support my immune system. There are reasons why people protect themselves and so many ways to protect ourselves. And yeah, lately I've been thinking about how protection can come intuitively, but I also think it's something that is taught, and that it matters what and how we learn about protection practices. Because, for example, say in my aim to protect myself, I don't want to block myself from myself. I don't want to block myself from genuine friendship and love, or confuse isolation, hypervigilance, and self-sabotage for protection, even though I can understand why myself or someone else might move through the world, this world with alertness and hypervigilance. Discernment and protection are actually a big deal. It's a big deal, but it's also part of regular, ordinary life. Protection is everything from airport security to people with security details, homes with protective plants and or covered in prayer, to energy hygiene and people strengthening their cybersecurity. Shout out to Uranus and Gemini. Change those passwords. Stay up to date on your passwords and your cybersecurity, to protecting your joy, to putting on sunscreen. So protection shows up in a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be like this epic, like it can be. Protection can definitely be epic, but it's also just like putting chapstick on your lips. you know, there's also embodied gratitude. That's even a form of protection. Tell me why I bought a really expensive charger for my phone, like a battery pack. Shout out to William Padilla Brown. It was a while ago, like 3 years ago. I was in his Instagram stories and he was talking about solar power. And at that time, I had some coins. So I bought a portable solar panel and a battery pack because I was in Arizona at the time. It's so sunny here. There's so much sun. It's like, how can I not get into solar power while I'm here? And so I bought this expensive battery pack, and it was so worth it, so worth it. But because I wasn't paying attention to it, I wasn't taking care of it, I wasn't being grateful, I lost it. I technically think it was stolen, but I lost it. And so, yeah, I've been thinking about like when I'm grateful and I express gratitude through my body, through presence and care. I just forgot my thought, but I'm just saying that when I yeah, when that gratitude is embodied, that's a form of protection. I hope that made sense. That's just me. You don't have to think that way. I'm not saying now you have to. Now you have to think this way. Now you have to live your life this way. I'm just sharing how gratitude is something that I've heard about all my life, but I'm starting to get it that gratitude, it can be more than like something that I like a process that happens in my mind, but that I can really develop a robust gratitude practice through my body and expressions of attention, presence, and care. And that probably requires me to slow down. Eh, anyway, getting back to protection. Protection can be a loving action. And I feel like Quincy's remembering, story keeping, and storytelling is a deep act of love. Thanks so much, everyone out there listening, for meeting me at the through line. I hope you enjoy episode 18 with Quincy Howard. All right, listeners, if you can / want to, please take your time listening to this episode. Make a cup of tea at home, find a cozy cafe, or listen on the go. Either way, I hope you find at least one thing in this episode that is interesting, sparks your curiosity, is helpful, or inspiring in some way. Until next time. Welcome to the podcast, Quincy. How are you?
I'm doing great today. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to get into this interview with you. Um, I'm coming in, I feel like I gotta like take a breath or something because I did an interview yesterday and I had so much energy. I was just like a ball of energy and I'm like, oh, maybe for this one, let me like slow down. Slow down. Um, so you grew up in Columbus, Georgia, is that right?
That's correct. That's right.
And I'm wondering, what was it like growing up there? Like, did you grow up in a small town? Is it really rural?
Yeah. Columbus is quite an interesting place. It's located in what most folks would consider Southwest Georgia. Um, and it borders the state line of Alabama. And the only thing that's like really separating Alabama from Georgia and Columbus from Alabama is the Chattahoochee River. So it is a river town, um, majority Black population, and surrounded by many other small rural towns. And so growing up in Columbus was really special because I was able to be around my folks. I was able to be surrounded around Black folks, and I also was very close to my family. So I grew up in Columbus, but all of my family, including my parents, grandparents, great grandparents, they are from a little, uh, for lack of words, peninsula of towns more south below Columbus called Ellaville, Georgia, Americus, Georgia, and Plains, Georgia. And if I really wanted to get more detailed, there's other little towns like Moultrie, Georgia, Albany, Georgia, um, Sylvester, Smithsville, Valdosta, which my folks are, in those places as well, but they're mostly concentrated in Americas, Ellaville, and Plains. We also have our family farm down there. So my weekends, my summers, I was in the country, I was on the farms, um, and I was just doing things that most rural children in the deep South was doing. I spent a lot of time with my elders, a lot of times in the fields, a lot of times learning agriculture. Um, a lot of times a lot of time spent with the women in my family and learning the old ways. Um, and that was really special for me. And I am grateful for my parents for allowing me to be brought up surrounded by something so important. Um, so yeah, like growing up, in Columbus and back and forth down to, Americus, Ellaville, and Plains was really special and is to this day still one of the biggest highlights of my life. It's just being able to experience the South uh, in such a potent way.
Wow. Well, when you started talking and you said that what is the Chattanooga River?
The Chattahoochee River.
The Chattahoochee River that
Hmm.
separates where you live at in Georgia from Alabama? Because I'm really interested in Alabama. And now I got to go look at a map and find this river and see exactly where you're talking about. And yeah, well, and while you were talking, I love that you know like the specific towns where your family comes from. I know that my maternal line uh comes out of Georgia, like my grandmother's side. So it really got me thinking, oh, I should get a little bit more clear about where everybody was coming from in Georgia, you know?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I love see like following your work for a while, and I social media has its issues, but like it's a massive archive of so much information. And Instagram isn't like a film or a book where stories are held, but it does. Instagram is just filled with so many like stories, and your Instagram account is like this deep rich archive of storytelling. um Now what was I going to say, because I lost my thought there. Wait, hold on. I lost my thought. Oh, and I noticed that you talk a lot about your family and elders in your life, and your like a family legacy. And I don't know, that this always stuck with me because I'm even though I have my own ups and downs with my family, I am fascinated by family because it's just such a it family really shapes us. I feel like I'm going to start meandering, but it's all to say that, like, I follow different families on Instagram, and I love movies about like family businesses and all those things. So I don't know, I just feel like this I feel like your connection to your family. And I have some questions later down about that. But you also call yourself a story keeper, and I was wondering, why do you call yourself a story keeper more so than like a memory worker, which it sounds like it's similar.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Simone. Like, I started referring to myself as a story keeper um, a little around the time when I transitioned to living on St. Helena Island in South Carolina. Doing the work that I was doing there, and that work also being so closely connected to my ancestral roots, um, by the way, of my father's bloodline, my paternal bloodline, seeing the land loss, seeing the loss of connection with culture due to that land loss, and also just seeing the loss of connection to land in that land loss with Black folks, um, made it very clear that not only did I need to be a memory worker, but it was important for me to gatekeep those memories and those stories. Um, because I feel like at that time, this was around 2019, 2020, the world was experiencing, a huge shakeup. And within that shakeup, a lot of these larger media sources and outlets were going to very marginalized places um, that Black folks populated, specifically in the South, and creating stories and creating bigger projects in very unethical ways. And our magic that has kept us specifically down here in the South for centuries was being exploited and broadcasted out to the world um, in a way that, like, it really, broke my heart. I feel like some folks might have saw it as like, okay, awesome, a spotlight on the South. But I don't know, it kind of opened up Pandora's box in a way to where it invited more and more and more and more people to come in and take without
Mm.
giving back. And so it was important for me to continue to, but also like make it known that my work was not to just gather stories or to be in community, but to also protect who we are. Um, because it's like when we don't have the land anymore, when we don't have proof that um, we have lived in these places, the only thing we have left, and historically that we've ever had left, is our oral history. Um, and so I took the idea of gatekeeping and tied it in with storytelling and called the work that I did story keeping as an act of protection.
That is so real. So real. And it made me think about um my mermaid siren sister Saskia, who's from the part of the world Oceania and
Mm-hmm.
in like so-called Australia, and she talks a lot about gatekeeping and how passionate she is about gatekeeping her culture and like Oceania mysticism and her specific cultural backgrounds. Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
when I think of the Sea Islands, um, and other places, I know other places are experiencing this, but specifically for the Sea Islands, I think about Gullah Geechee people, the culture, the history, the language, the food. Also, this is such a side note, but my grandpa is Geechee. He just never passed it down, so I'm not in proximity to like the identity and culture, but that was on
Mm-hmm.
my grandfather's line. So I think about that. I think about rice. There's so much that comes to mind, the land, but then also the stories of the places and the people being taken advantage of.
Uh,
And I believe in protection. Like protection is something I think about often, and I'm thinking about it more and more. I wonder if you could share more about what protection means to you because I feel like just walking around in the world, we need protection. Especially these days, lots
Mm-hmm.
of spiritual, energetic protection.
Mm-hmm.
But for like, but for like Saint Helena, like, and probably all the other islands, like, could you say more about protection?
Yeah. I'm finding myself thinking deeply um, about protection in regard to, these sacred spaces. Um, I don't know. I think that like what the experience and the collective Black experience um, of folks in America, but specifically in the South, and then even more specifically in the Deep South, um, we have never been protected. Everything that we have ever had, all the way down to our labor and our resources, our land, our waters have always been at risk from being taken from us. Um, and I think something that has been a known fact about us as a people um, is that we know how to protect ourselves in one way or another. I think about my dad. He always uses this line, but it's so serious and so real. And he's been saying it to me since I was a teenager. He was like, when you go out in this world, you got to be. Let me think of the way he said. He said you got to be spiritually wrapped and spiritually strapped. Meaning that we don't get to be in this world as free as others. And so the protection work has to be times 10 for us. In all the ways in which we need to protect ourselves, our physical bodies, our energetic and spiritual body, um, even down to our intellectual property, we got to protect because,
That's
we
right.
live in the age of the internet and folks just be stealing and taking. And so when I think about the South, specifically the Sea Islands, it is a place where folks' labor has been exploited for years, um, even post emancipation. And it is a place where, if you've ever been, um, it is dense still in plantations remaining, like actual vessels of plantation homes still existing, and also that are still dwellings that people still live in. And for me, that was a reminder um, of just how much we needed to gatekeep um, the culture and everything connected with the culture. Because even to this day, 2025, our folks are being taken from. And so I don't know, I feel like in all of the work that I do, others that I work closely with, um, our number one goal in the work that we do is protection,
Hmm.
and that is protection of our folks. Um, and I also think back to like history when it comes to us. It hasn't always been written in our favor. It hasn't always been 100% the truth. And so we as a people have had to rely on oral history. And that in itself is an act of protection because it's the only way that we are able to secure that what's ours remains ours and that it's there's no interference. And so when facts about our family line gets passed down from great 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 grandma to great 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 grandma to great great grandma to grandma to mama to me, that doesn't change, that doesn't shift. and that original fact has been protected from the original source. And I can know that to be true, and I can know that to be mine. And so, yeah, I think physically the protection is important, but for me, it's definitely spiritually and ancestrally that the protection is even more important, um, to keep a people in our identity.
Hmm. Yes, that sounds like the abundance and beauty of protection magic by way of story keeping and I yeah, I'm really fascinated by memory keepers, and you're the first person I've come across where you describe yourself as a story keeper. And it's just like this word that I feel like I want to meditate on because I'm really into stories. By way of movies. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the film industry, besides all the kind of weird, problematic things that be going on in the film industry, besides all that, like just this place where there's just stories and there's so many stories like Netflix and Tubi. You just go on there and there's so many storylines.
So
And
many.
yeah, and I'm like, I feel like it's one of the greatest stories are one of the greatest things, especially when they can be so imaginative and, all sorts of things. And I feel also being a story keeper is I definitely feel a position of power. And I felt myself really still when you were talking about oral oral history or oral transmission through your line, and you talked about and I was like, oh, you talking about a technology and
Yes.
making sure because you're right, there can be a lot of interference, and of course we know about all of the desire and attempt to rewrite history. And I've actually anyway, I and it's this is all to say, like, I think your work is really important because I think we do live in a time where someone can come in and create a narrative and alter a narrative or tell you what you're remembering and what you're sharing isn't real and all sorts of things. So just thinking about that role as the story keeper in a community, in a family, just for yourself, recording your own stories, like it's so interesting. And this brings me to my next question. And in an old post on IG, you said you are the griot of your family. And for folks who might not know what you mean by that, can you say more about that?
Yeah. Um, the griot of the family is essentially the keeper of the flame. It is the person that takes the initiative, and it also could be a person that has been like deemed or initiated by the folks that come before them to be the keeper of the flame. Um, that handles all things family and all things related to the family story. Um, they are the story keeper of the family. Yeah, they are the story keeper of the family. And essentially, physical vessel or physical manifestation of the family tree so in some sort of way. Yeah, that to me, if I can sum up the way in which I know and utilize the word griot, is definitely the keeper of the flame in the family. And there were other keepers of the flame before me in my family, and I grew up very closely with them, those elders. And I knew from a young age, due to these interactions and my close connection with these elders, that one day that will fall on me as a responsibility. I didn't know it would be this heavy.
Mhm.
um, and there's many moments where it is too heavy. Most recently, when I returned from Mexico, a very close friend of mine's, we went down to um, our paternal graveyard down in Plains, Georgia. And it's not like most family cemeteries where you have an entrance and, everything is manicured and you're able to find your family plots. This particular cemetery, the last person was buried there in the 70s. It's called Tabernacle Cemetery. You can't find it on Google Maps. You can't find it on Apple Maps. You can't find it on a map. You would need the coordinates or your memory to know where it exists. Um, and there used to be a church there called Tabernacle Church that was burned down by the Klan in the early 1900s. And yeah, after that church burned, uh, folks in the area shifted their burial sites, and those that had been buried there up until that burning um, laid to be returned to the earth, and the earth pretty much took it all in. And so it is a heavily forested area. It is a place where there are rattlesnakes and all the wildlife that you could think of. And every time I return to pay my respects and to tend to the area, it is a journey. And this past time that I went, I was looking for my great great grandfather and great great grandmother, and I just could not find them. I was like in a maze, and it was really heavy on my heart. And I remember my great uncle Philip, who's still with us. He told me about 10 years ago. He said, "The baton is now in your hand, and I need you to know that when it gets heavy, you have to know when to put it down." And it's moments like that where I'm reminded just how heavy this task is, and also how important it is to be the keeper of the flame, to be that griot in the family. Um, yeah, it is very special work, but it is story keeping as well at the root of it. And so it's like all of these things go back to the stories somehow. Um, Even when it's hard to, that you have to remember to come back to the story because the story is like this living thing. It's a living entity. It's not, ink on paper. It's not a blog. It's not a Substack article. It is a living entity that continues.
Wow. Ooh, well, I'm just sitting with that. I think why I'm so drawn to your work is that I feel like this might be vulnerable to say, but I'm sure other people experience this, but it's just like I wonder if you feel this way. I feel like the way that you talk about your family, it feels really like people have remained connected in some way. You know that something's been kept intact. Cuz I've always been bothered by the fact that like in my own family, because people move around so much and everyone moved this way and that way, and my great grandma moved away from the south. I feel like our people are scattered and buried everywhere, and
Mm.
that family cemetery and that journey you're talking about, going to find your ancestors, makes me pause um and be like, wow, what it must be like to go and look for your great grandma. Um Wait, who did you say you were looking for?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Great
Your
grandma, great grandfather, great grandpa, great great grandfather, and great great grandmother who, because of their age, were not buried next to my grandfather. And so it's like they're probably further back on that plot. And the truth is, there may have been many times that I walked over them. That is displaying the condition of the place.
what
But yeah.
what do you feel in your body as you like search? Well, yeah, what do you feel in your body as you like get in the car to go find your your ancestors? Like, what
Mm.
is that bodily feeling? I'm sure, like, maybe you're in the car, you're talking, listening to music.
I feel like when it's a different feeling for this particular bloodline because my other bloodlines, which are the Perrys, the Tysons, and the Browns, they are all laid to rest in known places. The Perrys, we have a family church and a family plot on a red clay road that leads right to our family farm. It's been our church and our family graveyard for years. Um, Same with the Tysons and the Browns. The Howards, on the other hand, are folks who they're the bloodline that, and it's the name that I carry, the last name that I carry, but they're also the bloodline that, for many reasons, there's a lot of disconnect. Um, my great 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 grandfather was a Geechee man from the Sea Islands of South Carolina. Um, in the early 1900s, they made their way to Georgia, right outside of Athens, Georgia, a little community called Wolfskin, Georgia. After Wolfskin, they came on down to South Georgia and settled in Plains. Um, and after my grandfather passed away, he died at a very young age. He died at the age of 31. Um, there was a shift in who the keeper of the flame was. And so a lot of information got lost or it was just kept here and there, but there wasn't one person that held the baton. And so fast forward through all of these years and this continuing of disconnection, we land now in the present. And then it's me that has been like gifted with this task of doing the work. And so when I go to my grandfather's home, that's also in Plains, um, that's being, you know, held by the land right now. And when I go to the family cemetery, it's definitely the feeling I get when I'm on the way to these places is it's a heavy sense of grief. I feel a lot of grief going to tend to this cemetery and to my ancestors in the cemetery because there's this unknowing. There's
Mhm.
this gap in the flame. There may have been moments where even the flame might have went out or the flame just beginning to just, you know, simmer versus being like, you know, like a huge big flame. The light man dimmed. Um, and so I don't know. It's like I could go, and even when I went down this most recent time, it's like when I went to the first few cemeteries, everything was good, and then like once we got to where the Howards are, it was just like my energy just shifted, and it puts me in a meditative meditative place. And it's almost like I'm preparing myself to go into ritual because it is going to take more than just physical strength to complete this task. It is definitely energy pull from the spiritual that makes me want to continue because there have been many times that I've tended to the cemetery and just have given up. There's been times I have not even been able to find it. Earlier on in my journey, I just could not find it. I couldn't find it at all. But now that I have like that memory and those images in my mind, and almost like this energetic connection to these coordinates, you can almost blindfold me and I can find it. But it's still, the grief has lessened through the years, but it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And even saying that, I'm like, a part of this is grief work, um, tending to those bloodlines in our, that we come from, and also more specifically those bloodlines that we have a very layered connection with.
You know, I think I um I think it's such an interesting thing to steward the memories and stories and all the things in a family, like to be the keeper of the flame is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. And I just feel like unless I what am I trying to say? I just I think I'm trying to say is that I think early on, like I don't know about you, but like early on in life, like in high school, I was always getting messages about like how to respond to the external, like always, there's always something going on in the world. How can I, you know, um just kind of respond externally, which is totally fine. Many of us are called to do XYZ in the world. So I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. I'm just saying that like I never, and maybe for a lot of people, I never heard or was encouraged to think about tending um tending my bloodlines, as you say, you know,
Mm-hmm.
nourishing the memories and the stories in my family because I noticed that you say you're a Cancer moon, and I noticed you're a Cancer moon, and like I think
Yeah.
the fourth house, yes. Well, I'm I'm just like, yo, being I'm just you as a Cancer moon and hearing everything you're sharing about the the lands that you've grown up on and you visit and your family and your elders and your ancestors, it makes me think of the fourth house in astrology, which is connected to the moon, and Cancer is ruled by the moon, and like there is this, and I feel like for many people, not everyone, thank God, but for many people,
Mm-hmm.
that family, that space of family is very wounded in different ways. And I'm sure there's wounding and
Mm-hmm.
scars and all sorts of things in your family. But also it feels like food, it feels like sustenance to hear you talk about just being the keeper of the flame and what that is for you. Because I think sometimes when we do have these sacred roles, they can be like romanticized a little bit, or people might see it like, wow, you are the the keeper of the flame, and your eyes get
Mm-hmm.
all big. But like you're saying that, just like with a lot of things, that can be hard. It can be heavy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
actually, what is it like? What is your experience like being a Cancer moon?
Ah! Oh man, let me tell you yeah. I think when my ancient ancestors and source and all the gods and goddesses and in between were in the lab. Yeah. Communicating with my parents on my design. They were like, okay, this one here is gonna be a big ball of emotion. And I think they knew, like, okay, if he's gonna be a Cancer moon, we're gonna need something to reinforce that. So I'm a Leo sun and a Leo rising, and that's the
Oh,
flame that keeps me
wow.
balanced. But yeah, yeah, I've felt everything that could be felt since I was knee high. I've always been a highly sensitive individual. Um, I have known things that I don't know why I know them. I have heard things that I don't know why I'm hearing them or seeing them. And it has taken a long time to center myself in what most would call like a gift, to center myself in the ability to just feel in the ways that I feel and to communicate the ways that I feel. Um, and to hold those ways. I think that's the biggest thing is like holding the ways in which I feel because I do feel things so heavy. I think on the flip side of that, because of the work that I have been tasked with, it is so helpful. Um, it has been a catalyst for the work that I do and being able to maintain myself within that work and also maybe maintain my sanity
Mhm.
because as you mentioned, this work is not easy. It is heavy. It can get very dirty
Mhm.
uh, when dealing with matters of the blood.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think being able to take whatever powers that those who carry the energy of Cancer within their chart have and utilizing it with the work has just been very helpful for me. It has really been a container for me to just exist. And I don't know, I be feeling everything. Be feeling
Wow.
everything. I don't know. And then this Cancer season has just been taking me up through there. It's been taking me up through there with all the feels. But, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have that type of emotional awareness about life and also about death and everything in between. And we out here riding the waves. No pun. We riding the waves.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I totally forgot it's cancer season right now.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Wow, to feel. Yeah, and I'm like, what is it to feel? To feel all the things, to feel like you were saying, to feel things you don't know what you're feeling and just that whole um I did an interview with someone named Charmaine Lee, and
Hmm.
we didn't she didn't get a chance to answer this question, but I wanted to ask her about her thoughts on the connection between like dreams and our emotional cosmos, because she had posted something where that term was referenced, like our emotional cosmos, and that never left
Mm.
me, because there's so many feelings to feel, so many, yeah, feelings, emotions, there's just lots to feel. And so, yeah, what might a Cancer moon be feeling and reflecting back to us? Because I literally, while you're talking, I was thinking that I saw the moon shining on the surface of the water, like how the light,
Mm.
I
Hmm.
and how the water is moving in like a ripple, and just seeing that light and that reflection. Um, well, you actually said something that's going to bring me to my next question, and please share whatever you want to share. If you want to skip this question, we could skip. It's just that let me come and see where I'm at here. Well, okay. I had my questions ordered a certain way, but you already talked about like the the things that you sense and your different kind of sensory experiences. So I'm just gonna go for this and then I'll come back to the other questions. But I notice you say you come from agricultural alchemists
Hmm.
and energy workers and clairvoyance. You also said some other things. And what I think is really cool is it sounds like from what I've just like, you know, been, keeping up with your posts on Instagram. You haven't been on there in a while, but yeah, I'm like this is a dope archive. I hope you and I know Instagram is, but I it, it seems like you're really sharing a lot there. And so what I think is really cool is it sounds like from what I've read, it sounds like your parents talk to you about like these kinds of experiences. And I think in my own family, there are people who have like different abilities or spiritual gifts, and many of us experience the same things. But the thing is, nobody talks. Nobody,
Nobody talks.
yes, nobody talks about it. You telling me, you telling me, you had a dream about this and I had a dream about this, or you telling me you saw that and all sorts of things. But
Hmm.
when people don't talk, you don't know that the other person is having similar experiences. So then you can't make the connections. And last year I talked to my mom and got clear on like some of the things that's been passed down in in our lines, and I've been able to pinpoint like what is being passed down in what line. So I'm just like, um why do you think, if I'm correct, why and like your parents being open with you about like clairvoyance, different clairvoyant abilities, why do you think your parents were so open with you?
Yeah, you said a lot of
I know. I'm such. Oh
no,
my
like
God.
no, in a good way. In a
Oh,
good way.
okay.
Yeah, in a good way. I'm just trying to pinpoint where I want to start.
I'm such.
Uh
I be asking long ass questions. I'm sorry.
No, please do not apologize. Please do not apologize. I have this huge smile on my face because I think, everything that you said is just really so true. Um, I talk to my friend about this a lot. When it comes, it's like you can't talk about the South and Black folks in the South without also there being taboo. They
Mm,
both exist at the
mhm,
same time. It's like a both and situation. Um, and so I think things, because the way religion found its way here and the ways it impacted our people, the connections that we have with all things that aren't religion. Most folks, maybe the elders in my family would say the secular, um, the things of the night, um, and what I guess you can say white America would consider juju, black magic,
mm.
or whatever other racialized term that they want to create for our technologies. Yeah, it is just a very taboo topic. And so I believe most Black folks, because of everything else it is, that we deal with in the world and in this society, the last thing we want to do is bring attention to the fact that we have these other abilities, um, and that and the impact that could have on us negatively.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
when I think about my folks, and because my folks, we are from what I would consider the deep south. Um, there was no other way around. Like you could not talk about it because it was so the everyday experience was saturated in it.
Mhm.
So I grew up hearing what my mom called old wives' tales. Some folks call it superstitions. But like every day I'm hearing like, don't do this, don't do this, do this, do this. Or I'm seeing her put these, old wives' tales into action. I'm seeing, you know, if she accidentally is, if she's sweeping and, she accidentally sweeps her foot, I'm seeing her go outside and burn the bottom of the broom or to just go buy a completely new broom. I'm seeing her sweep the house from the rear to the front, out the front door. I'm seeing her, do these rituals. I'm hearing my dad or the elders in my family speak of these ways. I'm hearing my great uncles speak about their connection to sowing seeds in the moon. You know, these are folks that relied on almanacs and relied on their connection with the land. You know, I'm seeing the women in my family go to church dressed in white. I'm seeing them anoint themselves, in the privacy of their rooms. And, a younger Quincy is just like, I don't know, it's just like me already feeling the things I felt and experiencing the things that I experienced on a spiritual, energetic level. And then seeing the adults in my life be so open with this and share it with me. Um, I don't know, it was just really such a gift. And I think my parents, even if they won't directly say it, they knew that it was important for us because I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers. It was important for us to know where we came from and these things that we're speaking of that goes with it, that comes with the package. You can't talk about being from this place, being from these people without also talking about their ways, and their spiritual gifts and abilities. um, I grew up with my mom talking to me about dreams. I can remember back as young as like 5 or 6, and my mom just talking about dreams or saying that she saw her mom, in the kitchen the night before, or saying that her father came and tucked her into bed. You know, these visions and these, premonitions and these apparitions of people in my home, and I'm like a young kid and I'm like, what? You saw what? Who did what? you know and then having the aunt that everyone calls, she's a little crazy but really she's tapped in, like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
these are things that I grew up around, and I didn't know what they meant until I knew what they meant. And it's important for me now to share that same information with like my niece and nephews. I have two nephews and a niece. And so I was sharing with a friend recently, like when I lived in Savannah after I lived in St. Helena, and my niece and nephews came to visit for the summer. And I woke up one night and my niece was just standing at the altar. And instead of me taking that moment to be like, oh, go back to bed, I asked her what brought her to the altar. And it was a bell on the altar. She didn't know, but this bell was her great grandmother's bell that was passed down to me when my grandmother passed. It's an old copper, an old brass bell. And she just kept ringing the bell. It's like 3 in the morning. And, I just took that time to talk to her about things in a way that wasn't too heavy for a
Mm-hmm.
9 year
Yeah.
old. But I don't know. I just the ways in which my parents was as open with me about these ways. I want to be the same. with, my niece and nephews. And I think that is how the stories continue, and that is how the identity continues, and that's how we continue to add, you know, power back into that living being that we call the story.
Oh, I like your I like your family. I love that. Like I love that so much that you had that experience. All these experience, like I love that you're having I love that you've had that experience and that you're going to share share that or provide that for your nieces and nephew,
Yeah,
right?
my niece and I have two nephews.
Yeah, because it's just like imagine the dreams you're having, the visions, all the things, and it's like cricket sounds or
hmm
no one you don't know what's going on, there's no one to talk to, and then you got those messages out there like you're crazy, it's demonic, like all the things. So
Yes.
when you have that strength in the family of being like, "Well, come here, child, and let me tell you
hmm
what's going on."
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, you brought up cancer. Both my youngest nephew and my niece are both cancers. So
Wow.
at a very young age, I was talking to them about dreams or seeing things, or just like my youngest nephew, we talked about dreams all the time. There's a period where, like, for a year straight, he was calling me, telling me about his dreams. And then he's like, one time he called me, he's like, Uncle Quincy, I just like, and he didn't have any other like ways to say it. He's like, I just meditate when I'm in the shower and I speak to the water and I know it
Oh.
hears me. And I'm like,
Oh.
I'm like, you do? Okay, tell me more. Like, and then he's getting older now, so like the older you get, the more you probably feel shame about these experiences. But I think at the core, what I want them to know is that no matter what the world tells them and the people they may come into contact in their life tells them, is that there's power in these knowings and these hearings and these seeings and these feelings, um, and that power that power is the source that has allowed our family to continue, and has allowed them to even come into existence. It
Mhm.
is memory, or like I like to refer to as rememory, but it is memory. It's memory. And so it brings a smile to my face to even see the generations coming after me experiencing things that I experienced at their age.
Wow. I'm always saying, "Wow," but I really sometimes I really am like, "Wow." Maybe I say wow to sort of fill the space when I sometimes I have no words and I'm just like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
you know? But I can't figure which one I want to ask first. But since we're talking about children, did you ever hear stories as a kid that stayed with you until this day?
So many stories.
Maybe
So
one,
many
maybe
stories.
maybe one that I'm always so serious and so deep. I don't know. Maybe a story
hmm
that's like um that makes you laugh.
Ooh, I gotta think on that. That makes me laugh.
But if there's one that's just coming up, you it could be that one.
It can be that one. Okay. Yeah, now that you say that, I'm like, why were these adults telling me these heavy stories as a child? Like, like stories around like death and like, taboo topics. I can't say that I can think of one that makes me laugh, and I'm sure that there were some. Um, and I won't go too much into detail because it will probably, I don't want to put too much of like my family business out there.
Mm.
Um, but the one that's coming to mind is the story of my grandfather, my great grandfather. Um, his mistress put root on him, and he
Ooh.
never came back to his family. And he had, he had an entire other family. He had another wife, and he had other children. And these other children are my great uncles and great aunts. Um, and I've heard the story from a few different um, people in the family that essentially conjure was at work in that process. I don't know how true that is, but being told that at a young age
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what appears to be facts, I don't know. Um, but yeah, one of my aunts told me that story that that's why great grandpa never came back to the farm.
Wow. That must have been a story to hear. Top, my family got all types of drama too. That sounds like something a situation my grandfather's mother had to deal with. And
Really?
she's Geechee. That's where the Geechee line comes from. They're out of South Carolina, and
Mm-hmm.
they're in we trace them to Sumter County. But wow, that must that must have been an experience.
It was because the thing about I feel like maybe this is just the entire black experience, but more so like black elders in the South, they just will say something out of the middle of nowhere. You can be talking about how beautiful the sky is today, or like you know how good the food is, and then they'll just drop it on you and be like, "Well, such as your uncle killed your aunt," like just very heavy layered
Oh my
stuff, and I'm
God.
like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa!" Like pump the brakes. And like what I've realized as I've gotten older is that when my elders are getting older, the stories are like leaving them. The stories
I
are
see.
leaving them because they know that they're closer to their transition, and so they're like, I got to get the stories out. I got to get the stories out so I could be on a farm with my great uncle picking pecans, and he may just blurt out something and then go back to complete silence.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, okay, well, I'll take that. Thank you for that information. This pertains to the family. I will go back to my laboratory and like store it somewhere. But it's like I'm learning, like when they get to talking, like I have a great aunt still in Plains. That's also a Howard and a part of the Argiti bloodline. I'll just go there and I know that I'm not going to say much for about 3 hours and I'm just going to let her talk.
That's right. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Yep. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this makes me think I need to start getting my grandma to talk more because she she doesn't really, you got to kind of
Stir the pot.
yeah, you got to stir the pot. Mm-hmm. You got to stir the pot. Wow, when the stories start leaving the elders, I mean, I feel like I'm gonna keep that in mind as my grandparents get older. Because I think I'm starting to see that with my grandfather. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, yeah, that's something to pay attention to. Yeah, I'm sure there are signs when people start getting close to that transition period,
Mm-hmm.
when they start kind of, I don't know, it's like they start kind of bleeding into or fading into the other realm. I don't know, that like when they
Yeah.
start, sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but I know we've talked a lot about family, and I want to just linger a little bit more in like this space of family. And then I'd love to hear more about your experiences, like living in St. Helena and your travels. And then we'll wind down. But so again, you've shared a lot about your family and the elders you've connected with over the years. Oh yeah. And so I don't know if you've ever heard of the term family constellation, um, but I like this word because it helps me think about my family tree, like my blood and chosen family, my ancestors and my guides, and also like the lands where my family comes from and live, and like the
Hmm.
different plants and animals and cosmic elements. Like I feel like family constellation can encompass a lot. And I did do some family constellation uh sessions with this practitioner where I got to learn about certain dynamics about my immediate family. Um so I know that it's a profession, but just the term in general really like sparks my imagination. So I'd love to know, like, if someone was like, or if I was like, and you can share whatever you want. It doesn't have to be, yeah, you can share whatever you want. If I was like, if you had to, sh- if you had to describe your family constellation, like, what would you say? In thinking of
Hmm.
terms of, like, what does that encompass for you?
Thank you for sharing this terminology with that. I never heard the idea of a family constellation, although I've always felt it, or referred to it in other ways. I had never heard it summed up to this, and I really like just the word constellation in general. Um, for me, I feel that like it embodies all the things within and outside of myself that makes me who I am. And so it's like we have like the bloodline ancestors and family, those bloodlines. And then we have like, I feel like I have like my chosen family. I often think about like my ancient ancestors. I also think about like my past selves as a part of that constellation. So, for those that believe in, you know, us existing in different lifetimes and different timelines, I think these, other versions of myself
Hmm.
that are existing or have existing as a part of that constellation. Um, I think of like the land and the water as a part of that family constellation. Those are living beings that we get ushered into this world through. We get ushered in through water, and we go back or on to our next,
Hmm.
journey via the land. And some of us via the water, depending on, like if we're doing cremation or whatnot. Um, and so I think the land and the water specifically are a part of that constellation. And even furthermore, the elements are part of that because I think they make up who we are. Um, what else? What else? Who else? uh, yeah, I would say that those things make up that constellation for me. And also maybe even adding like my future self
Hmm.
and the descendants of, these bloodlines. So like the future descendants,
Hmm.
um, and the future ancestors.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, the constellation could just go like I'm seeing it right
Yes.
now in my like I'm looking up to the ceiling right now and I have my head stretched out and it's like I can touch them all and like they are like this roadmap that makes me think of cartography a lot. Um, and the ways in the ways in which we map our lives and our experiences and how closely we can lay our hands on them because of these things that I'm naming. You know, I can go to my family land in a certain place here in the South and that can connect me to that constellation energetically. Also physically, if there are people still there, but energetically, I can lay my bare feet on the soil and know that like my family was there and this constellation exists here. I can go out and light a flame and do the same thing and light a fire. Or I can go swim in the ocean and feel that connection. And so I don't know, you kind of got me on the road with this constellation thing. I'm like,
Yes.
yeah. Like I think I'm gonna continue to think more on that as this weekend approaches, because I feel like I've always thought of these things, but I never had a word to put to it. And I'm like not really a person that, as much as I love words, I don't like labeling things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm liking this. So thank you for gifting it to me, and thank whoever gifted it to you for gifting it to you.
You know what? I think I was even to this morning before we press record, I was thinking about my questions. And this was one of the this was probably the last question that was still formulating. And it came so clearly to me like, oh, I want to ask this question about your family constellation because even though you don't say it, I feel like what you share, that's what it makes me think of. Like it just makes me think of, yeah, all just because it's the way that you talk about your family and the land there and just your experiences, it makes me think of that word. So it yeah, I'd be curious to see how you explore family constellations. And it yeah, and because you're like a visual ethnographer and you take photography, it'd be interesting. And you're already doing it. You've already been doing it, like capturing your family constellation, as it emerges and changes. And I also feel like like we do have a creative role in our family constellation, which you're the keeper of the flame. That's definitely a creative role in the family constellation. And so um yeah, future descendants. Some I tend to think kind of like in star systems and worlds and things. But I
Mm-hmm.
think like how you're saying, you can connect with your family constellation with your feet on the soil.
Yes.
And that is enough. That's more than enough.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it's really making me think. I was gifted with the opportunity to come into an artist residency a few years back in Walterboro, South Carolina, called the Ferret House. Shout outs to Brittany for that opportunity. And going into that space, because it was the invitation to the Ferret House was not like other residencies, um, in the fact that it did not ask for you to produce. It actually invited you to rest and to lean into the things that you needed to lean into while you were there. And so I did a lot of resting, but I also wanted to prioritize and be intentional about doing something creatively that I hadn't done before, but that also just felt fun and not so serious. And so um, before my residency began, I just remember grabbing a bunch of family obituaries, and I went and made copies of them, and a bunch of family pictures, and making copies of that, and just like journals and like family grimoire. I have this huge family grimoire that is kind of like a roadmap to like all of my bloodlines. And like I just like threw them in a big old duffel bag, and I made my way from St. Helena to Walterboro. And the ideas kind of came to me as my time there began. And I found I went to this thrift store and found this, really it was an antique shop. I found this old map of Georgia. I think the map was like a 1960s map of Georgia, the state of Georgia. And I just got a red pen and a highlighter, and I start like marking the places in which my family has existed in this on this land. And then I just started pulling the pictures and like the journal entries, and like I have handwritten letters from like one of my uncles on my mom's brother, his last days in the hospital, and there this exchange between the two of them. So like this like almost like a pen pal type of situation, of letters back and forth, and like all these different artifacts from my family. And I don't know, I just start mapping them out. So like hearing you uh use the word constellation is reminding me of that moment. And I ended up naming the piece Wayfinding to Hawkins Street, which is the road in which my mom grew up on, Hawkins Street in Americus, Georgia. The house is no longer there, but the well pump remains, which they used to pump water from. And it was definitely like me, I think about the black mapping of the South. I think about cartography. I think about all of these things and the idea of wayfinding and the things that connect us like back to who we are, and kind of like that reminder or that memory of how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, I'm thinking back to that piece while we're talking about the idea of a family constellation. And I think that was kind of like a physical representation of what it is that you're speaking to.
Wow. Yeah, and I bet you someone in your line is probably gonna be looking at that.
Oh yeah, I still probably my niece or one of my
uh,
nephews, whichever one of them, ends up being the keeper of the flame.
ain't that something?
Yep.
See, I think, you know, we people do things like in the moment because it's always great to be in the moment, in the present, and then realize, oh wow, this somebody in the future or already right now is already gonna see this.
Hmm.
So it makes you yeah um yeah, that sounds like something. It just makes me think like you're not only keep stories but like you create too. You're
Hmm.
creating. um Sounds, it's like a very dynamic fire tender, you know
Yes,
um
yes.
very dynamic. And feel like I'm just absorbing what you're sharing. I'm also like, I need to go look at a map so I can go see where these places are. um
Yes.
yeah, in the deep south. um which I'm gonna this will bring me. I always feel like, I know this is probably because of probably the trauma of the older generations in my family, but I've always heard like, it's so funny. This is hilarious because my great grandmother, Mildred, so her line comes out of Georgia. She moved to North
Hmm.
Carolina when she was a baby, and then during the great my no when she was like a child or something, and she grew up in North Carolina. And then during the Great Migration, we called her Mama. Mama and her family went up to Brooklyn, and then the
Hmm.
family became huge in Brooklyn just from her as the matriarch. And then my grandma was born in Brooklyn. She migrated out. Like, there's lots of migration stories. But I always ask my grandma, I said, how come you never stayed in the South? Like, we all could have been in the South right now, but we're not. And her response is, oh no, I don't want to. That's always been a response. Like, no, I could, even though we have family members in different states and different places.
Hmm.
Now tell me why. I'm actually trying to get to Florida. Now tell me why she is moving to North Carolina.
Uh-uh.
She's moving.
Uh-uh.
She's moving for decades. She's been like, no, I'm not. And anytime I mention Mississippi or Alabama, even though she was actually stationed in Alabama one time because she was in the military, she'd be like, no, that
Mm-hmm.
there's always like this thing with like the deep South. And I think I want to hear your thoughts on the deep South, and because you've traveled throughout the South, you've seen so many places in the South, and
Mm-hmm.
like what, and you've captured so much. Actually, you got a lot of good food photos on there too. Probably probably not all the way, just in the South, but there's
Uh-huh.
some really great food photos. I'm like, dang, you're eating well.
We eat good in the South. We eat real good.
Yeah. Look, if I can get to Florida, I ate really well when I was in New Orleans. Mm,
Mm-hmm.
mm, mm.
Some
Uh,
delicious food there.
yeah, and I said I barely touched the surface, probably.
Yeah,
Barely touched the surface.
you gotta get into somebody auntie kitchen.
That's right. That I need that experience, and so I just think it's hilarious that for decades she's been like, no, no. Now she's going to North Carolina where there's other family members. But this is all to say that like it's interesting how people can still have assumptions or misconceptions about a place even after it's changed, or there's like documentaries illuminating a place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you were to like meet someone who is like the deep South, like what would you say to help them get a better understanding if you wanted to? Because it's not like you gotta be understood out here.
Right. Right. Because my initial response is like, if I heard somebody say that about the Deep South, is you ain't meant to understand what you ain't meant to know. That's probably would be the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I would have said. I
And then
get
kept
real,
it pushing.
I would have kept it pushing. The people in my life probably get tired of me like ranting about it, and folks that know me, from the creative world, or maybe even just, follow my journey via, social media platforms. In the words of Erica Badu, if we was to switch up what it is that she says is, I'm sensitive about the South. I am a very sensitive person about the South. And I think that the magic that has kept this landmass that we call America together is housed here. And it's been housed here from the beginning. And that's not to say that magic doesn't exist elsewhere, but this is where it was at in its original form. This is where the source is. I quote Sarah Days, another Geechee person uh, from the South and from South Carolina, but they say the South is a portal. And it very much is. It is a portal. It is a place where most of our stories began. If you are Black in America, most likely somewhere down your bloodline, your family began in the South. No matter if you live in California, no matter if you live in Chicago, or the Midwest, no matter if you live, in New York, Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
most folks are gonna be able to say, well, my grandma, my great grandma, somebody in the bloodline started in the South. And so if I could simply if somebody was to say something about the South or the Deep South, or just, have hesitations around it, the South is the womb. The South is the womb that has carried us all out into this world. And I have no other ways to see it as, as anything else other than that. It is the womb.
The void, the
Yes.
darkness, the
Yes.
the entryway, the gateway, the birth canal.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never heard that before, but actually the person's episode after yours mentions portals also, portals in New Orleans. I'm not going to tell you who. I'll let when the episode comes out, I'd love for you to listen to it because this person talks about their experience in New Orleans and this person is saying like I think people think when you talk about portals you're speaking very like metaphorically, which portals can be metaphoric, but she's like portal these it's like a real portal. They're real portals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And you can feel the energy shift, you know. I don't know how much you know about like ley lines, but I know you
Yeah.
know, you know.
That's what
Yeah.
she sent me a voice memo after the interview going saying more about that.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the people that know and the people who also uh, were a part of the very beginning of building this world as we know it. They knew this is very ancient knowledge. Uh, this land definitely carries um, portals and energy points and points of energy. And there are roadmaps that we probably can't see, but they are roadmaps that exist that, you know, or paths um, or routes that you can take to get to these different energetic, you know, checkpoints, if you will. And yeah, I feel like the South is one of those places, in different places in the South. It's like how you can be in one, let's say this, you can be in one county and drive over to the next county. You're just like, oh, no, the energy kind of shifted. Or like, I ain't feeling the energy of this place. I feel like similar with the South. As like, I think about all of my years, my early 20s, I spent a lot of time in New Orleans. And I could definitely feel the energy shift as I'm crossing over Lake Pontchartrain.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like an actual portal when you enter New Orleans. You know, Louisiana as a whole, but specifically New Orleans, it is actually like a portal. I can say the same thing about the Sea Islands. I can say the same thing about St. Helena. I can say the same thing about Sapelo. I can say the same thing about Defusky. You know, you can feel that energy and that transference of energy within yourself and outside of yourself when you're entering these places. But hey, that's for her episode. I'm not gonna get too much into it, but I say all that to
I
say is like I'm right here with you.
I cannot wait for you both to hear each other's episodes. I cannot wait. Hold on real quick.
Okay.
And you know what? This confirms a lot so much for me in my personal life. Um and while you're speaking, I'm just like, I don't know if you ever had this experience where you're feeling things in a very kind of subtle way that doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's open to there being lots of questions and doubt, but like there's just something there. And what you're just saying, like, it just confirms to me so much about what I know, but I'm still unsure of. And when you hear other people say, no, no, like people are sharing things you're experiencing or things you're thinking about. It's who people like you might not know so well. It's like, okay. And I'm sure lots of people where you live and throughout the South know exactly what you're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
and speaking of St. Helena, so we're winding down. I'm just going to ask you about St. Helena and your time in Oaxaca and any last thoughts on your heart. So we're winding down, but so you had a chance to move to St. Helena, and I wonder if you could take us through your that decision to move there and what it was like getting there. Because I think if I remember right, um, like that was a process. It wasn't something where you just up and just moved there, was it?
Both and
Okay. Okay.
both and I think the process was happening in the background. I didn't know that it was happening, but it was happening for me. if you get what I'm saying. Um, I had been visiting the island since I really started getting really deep into a lot of ancestral research, not even just from like, a computer standpoint, but actually physically going to places where my ancestors once lived and existed. And I had gotten the information that like, I kind of grew up knowing about our, us being Geechee via the Howard bloodline. But South Carolina was not a place that we grew up going to because the Howards made their way to, South Georgia. And I would experience, remnants of our culture. Like I would go down. So like there's a group of Howards that left Plains, Georgia in the 1930s. They moved down to a little old section in Miami called Color Town. Some people call it Negro Town. It's now called Overtown because a bridge was built over or right through it. So a lot of the Howards went down to Overtown in Miami. And so like growing up, when I would go visit, my cousins in Miami, I had a great aunt, my great aunt Pearlie. She would be making food and like she just called it seafood rice. But what we was eating was red rice. We was eating red rice. And, we was having okra and like, you know, it was to me, I was just like, okay, like this seems to be something that's a part of who I am, but there has been a disconnect. So like I said, like 2018, 2019, I really started hitting the ground, physically going to these places that the Howards had been to. And the Sea Islands was an important step. And so I was being drawn to St. Helena and I was visiting St. Helena on and off, on and off. It got to the point where I was going to St. Helena multiple times a year. And I would meet different people on the island, or I was being drawn to different people on the island that brought me into their home. So at this time too, I need to say I was living in Tampa, Florida. So hopefully, hopefully you're
Oh
able to
wow,
still
so
follow
you've
me.
been in Florida too.
Yeah. My mom's maternal bloodline are down in Florida. So the Browns. So all of my folks in Tampa are in West Tampa, Ybor City, off Nebraska Ave. Yeah,
I love
I have roots
Florida.
there. Yes, we love. That's a whole nother conversation in itself, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was living in Tampa at the time. I had left Atlanta and was living in Tampa, and then really hit the ground. Living in Tampa allowed me the space to heal from a lot of things I was working through, but also allowed me to lean into my spiritual, path, and then also tending to matters of the bloodline. And so
Mhm.
I'm visiting St. Helena, I'm being brought into the house in the homes of like different elders. Auntie Janice, rest in peace, Ife Teo, and then also folks may know her as Sandra Boy, but most folks know her as Sasa. All of these people, all these women brought me into their homes. And each time I went, the land kept calling me back. And I was spending a lot of time too in like other, you know, places in the region, a lot of time in Charleston, a lot of time uh in between, a lot of time in between. And but I kept being called back to St. Helena and I didn't know why. Things just started moving around in my life, not even at my hands or, things that I orchestrated, like just major things start shifting in my life. And it got to the point to where it was like, your time in Tampa is up. Like you can no longer be here.
Mhm.
Um, and there were a lot of moving parts at play, but like I knew that like a shift had happened. And I got a call from one of my elders on the island. They said, come home. Come home. Like you've been doing this tango for years now. Come home. You have a place here. And that was that was the beginning of it. Packed all my stuff up in Tampa, rented me a U-Haul truck, put my car in the back of the U-Haul, and I began, life in St. Helena. And that was just like a domino effect. Like it was like this unseen life force just like pulled me in, and like there was work to be done. And it was a pivotal time in my life. It set the stage for just a lot of major changes, a lot of revelations, a lot of downloads, a lot of uploads, like a lot of relationships. Like it just was like this whirlwind of surrender. And I had no control of what was happening, how it was happening, or sometimes even not even knowing why it's happening. But I know it needed to happen. And I don't know, just a really sacred time in my life. I ended up leaving in 2023, spent a little time in Savannah as like this just like brief intermission moment while also still being connected on the island. It was weekly, every weekend, every other week, I was back on the island doing community work and just connecting with kinfolk there. And then fast forward after Savannah, I'm now, living in Oaxaca. And so that's kind of like the timeline of how things went and how I initially got to the island in the first place.
Come back home. Come back home. And the unseen forces. Yeah. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
interesting how our lives unfold. Because there's so many choice points and so many things that can take you this way or that way. And I think sometimes I get caught up in the like, well, why did I end up here? And why did I end up here? Whereas you you just you end up where you end up, and maybe you can't always understand it. When you left St. Helena, did you feel like you understood what brought you there, or is there still a little bit of mystery of how that all unfolded?
I think there will always be a bit of mystery around how it unfolded. But I remember when I left, I kind of had this voice that said the work is done for now, but the work is never done. And so there was a lot of grief behind that. I was still experiencing grief, as recent as like late last year, for having to leave the island. Because the truth is, whatever that voice or whoever that was, the work is never done. Right now, the island is facing challenges of land loss and land loss of a large, of a great amount. Development for a golf course and a golfing community that is not inclusive to us or the island's people. And so, I say all that to say it's like, yeah, the work is never done. I just knew in that season for me, there needed to be an intermission in that work for me to also go on to what was next for me. And so I like to, when people ask me this, I like to say that it's still continuing. One of my things most people know me as is like I'm always saying life is continuing. And so in that same note, my work is still continuing there. Just recently left there. I went there to see Kim folks recently, and like almost got pulled back in. Like almost got pulled back in because there's so much work to be done. And like, Quincy, we need you for this. We need you for this. Da, 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 da. And I know also that like I'm one person and I can't be in two places at once. Maybe energetically I can, but like I don't know. I just know that my journey has shifted. But because this place is home for many reasons, and also because of my ancestral connection, to the Sea Islands as a whole in South Carolina, um, that work just will never be complete. It'll be a lifelong thing.
That sounds exciting, and also, yeah, you're speaking of grief, so that ongoing grief work. I've been learning over the last couple of months how grief is connected to love. Um, so
Mm,
yeah, that grief love work. It is interesting to be kind of energetically tied to a place and maybe feeling that magnetic pull whenever you go there, when you're close, but then being called to Oaxaca. It like that literally. I feel like I have an energetic cord with New York City that's waned over the last few years, even though I didn't want it to. But I'm pulled by my bloodline because my grandma retired to Arizona. I feel
hmm
like we can literally be pulled by our family lines, our bloodlines to different places, and that
Yes.
it's ancestral, it's familial. I think it's also astrological. Like we're
hmm
pulled. So here you are. You're in. You're between these different places, and some people are like their life is that they live in one place, um, and their aura is like you know it's in this one place, which is completely fine. I'm just talking about how people have different lives. But then there's other
hmm
people who are in between these different places. And so for me, I think a lot about, well, how do I manage this without being become like fragmented that it hurts me, you know? Like what
mm
is it to be between places and not fragmented, if that makes sense? Like you still maintain your wholeness even when you're from Columbus, Georgia, but you got that tie to St. Helena, but now you're exploring your new selves in Oaxaca. And some people might see that as, well, that person's all over the place and blah 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 blah, whatever, you know. Um but I think, like, because of how life continues, we're in different
Yes.
places. So
hmm
I would love to bring us to the last question here. If you have anything you want to respond to that, please feel free to include it in this next answer. But so you're like a traveler. You've visited so many different places. You've been on the road a lot. And what I think I have an idea of what brought you to Oaxaca, but what did bring you to Oaxaca?
Yes. I think if I can just be as straightforward as possible, it was the land. Before I knew that I wanted to make the full transition to Oaxaca, I just visited. I visited and went and lived there for like 2 months. Um, and I got a chance to spend some time in a more rural region with um, some very special women, and most folks may know them as the women of the red clay. And they make these vessels that has sustained their family for generations, uh, differently than other folks in that region, using the red clay. They go up high into the mountains in the winter seasons, and they harvest lots and lots of red clay to use for their work. And I never forget when I first got the chance to sit down with them, that was the thing we had in common. When I first laid my eyes on red clay in Oaxaca, it instantly took me back home. It took me back to those red clay rolls on our family farm. It took me back to me just being barefoot, running up those roads and like playing in the clay. It took me back to the stories of my mom telling me her journey of actually taking the clay into her body when she was pregnant with myself and my brothers, as medicine. Um, yeah, it took me back. It took me back. And because I've existed in all these different places, it was that reminder that home can be anywhere. And so seeing that soil is what sealed the deal. I could say, oh, it's the good food. I could say it's the culture. I could say X, Y, and Z. But when I saw that soil and when saw the connection that these women have with the soil, it mirrored the connection that the women in my family have had with the soil. To me, it was like that reflection and also the thumbs up at the same time. Like, this is where you're supposed to be. And I was able to ground in that fact. I came home, I handled business, and I went home to Oaxaca. And that is where I continue to be until this journey says otherwise.
I'm always like, water is the great connector. And you sharing this, yeah, it's like soil. Soil can be the great connector, a great connector too. That you saw yourself in the red clay of Oaxaca.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also just in that exchange with these women, and like now that I live in Oaxaca, this is more like a ritual now. Like I spend a lot of time with these women, and they've kind of taken me in as like a student of theirs. But I showed them photos of the red clay back home, and to see their eyes just almost come to tears, and like they speak their indigenous language. They speak Zapotec, and so although they can speak Spanish, uh, when I'm with them, mostly they're speaking Zapotec, and so the ways in which we communicate is not really verbally. I may speak a little Spanish here, they may speak a little Spanish there, but ultimately, the ways of communicating and connecting goes back to all the feelings and the emotions, and so like I'll show them pictures of the clay and like they'll just like their eyes will just tear up and they'll put their hands over their heart and like they'll just be like, show me more. And like to see them connect with it in the same ways in which I connect with their red soil, it's just a mirror, it's a huge reflection. And like, I don't know, it just keeps me centered in knowing that maybe not for the next, maybe not 10 years from now, but maybe for now, this is where I'm supposed to be. And like I'm constantly seeing things around. So it's like you mentioned the South. I tell people that like the South is still with me in Oaxaca. There's so many things about Oaxacan culture that connects with the Deep South. Their love for pecans. On Palm Sunday, they go and they braid together palm leaves, similarly to our kinfolk in the Sea Islands. Um, I've got a chance to even see Black folks in Oaxaca along the coast of Chica. I've been spending some time there and hope to spend more time there. And, to have them call me cousin and brother and actually argue with me when I say I'm not from there. And they're like, no, yes, you are. You are from here. And so, like, when you mentioned, like, how our bloodlines can like pull us to these places. I'm like, maybe I don't have any recollection of it, but maybe some of my ancient ancestors were indigenous to this place, and I'm being pulled back to remember, and to catch the flame there. I don't know, but it's definitely an active spirit to just surrender and to be able to go, not out of like running away, but just listening. And I feel like, St. Helena happened and Oaxaca happened because I listened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I want to continue listening because that's where the answers are for me. But I don't know. I'm just like, my heart is just very full to be where I am now. Yeah.
Wow, I feel that. I feel that you're speaking and connecting through the soil been able to relate with other people through the soil and and still have a sense of yourself and where you come from while you're in another place. You know that that's possible. And yeah, sometimes I feel in life, at least for me, like I want things, I want to go in certain directions, but ultimately, like getting in that space of listening, I feel can open up so much. And
Mm-hmm.
listening for where you're like listening for your desires and where you feel good and what's opening up for you. I'm so happy that you've found a home in Oaxaca. You found a place where you see yourself, your family, you're meeting new friends, and I'm so happy for you, genuinely. And yes, like maybe it goes back to that Cancer moon, like just this sense of home, and
Yes.
home can be it is a big topic, that sense of home. Oh, and you said being centered, the soil centers you, and I said I know there's going to be some
Mm-hmm.
growers out there, herbalists, people who are going to be shouting, be like, that's right, the soil centers me, the soil grounds me, the soil
Yeah.
helps me remember. Um, Quincy, this has been such a gift. And when we first got on, I was like, in my mind, I was like, whoa. Because I'm like, okay, so I'm actually talking to this person, like in the way of like, wow, so this is actually happening. I've been having some surreal experiences lately, but I want
Mm-hmm.
to say thank you for your time, your energy, for sharing from your spirit and your experiences. Do you have any last thoughts on your heart?
I've got the biggest smile on my face. I want to mirror that same gratitude back to you for just like inviting me to have this conversation, opening up the space to talk about all things sacred and in between, and to just continue the work that you're doing. I'm grateful that you are like putting yourself out there. It's probably inspiring other folks to do the same. And even with me, I feel like right now I'm in a period of just like in between, and like this has like fueled my fire, this conversation. And so I'm grateful to you for, you know, being the catalyst for that. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing else on my heart but love. And like, I know the world is doing what it's doing. And I just hope folks are just out there taking care of themselves, and that they too continue to like find home in all the places, that they feel led to. And if they don't know how to find home, that they can take pieces of home with them. I think that is something that we need right now, specifically in what it is that we're all navigating in the world, is that feeling of home, that centeredness. But yeah, I'm just grateful for the experience, and I look forward to seeing what other conversations you have after this. And yeah, I don't know, we may have to chat again.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to. After we stop recording, we could keep talking about how to stay in touch, because I know, we all need breaks from Instagram and just connecting with life IRL. So it'd
Mm-hmm.
be cool to find a way to stay in touch. Quincy, thanks so much for meeting me at the Through Line. I've just been enjoying just speaking with people, and yeah, part of the Through Line is like water being this kind of way to connect with people and what happens, we start
Mm-hmm.
we hear about soil, we hear about family, we hear about all sorts of things. So I just want to say thank you again, um,
Yes.
and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Simone. Likewise. Thank you. just yeah. Thank you so much.